My darling children, the very last time I had a real conversation with my son, David, his hands were red, raw, and chapped, plunged deep into a sink of greasy, steaming water. He was wearing a stained white apron. His hair was damp with sweat, and the clatter of industrial dishwashing machines was roaring behind him. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a confusion I hadn't seen since he was a little boy who'd lost his favorite toy. He asked me, his voice barely a whisper over the noise, "Mom, why would you do this?" He gestured around the bustling kitchen of the city's finest steakhouse, a place he used to take his wife to celebrate, and he asked me why I had bought the entire restaurant chain, only to have him installed as their newest dishwasher. And all I could think of, in that moment, was the sting of cold, congealed gravy on my tongue, and the lonely chill of a plate of leftovers. Hello, everyone. I'm what you can call Grandma Eleanor. My full name is Eleanor Vance. I am 72 years old, and I come from a quiet, leafy town in the Midwest, a place where family values are meant to mean something. This is a story I have held locked in my heart for the last 2 years. It's a story that carries the weight of a lifetime of love and a moment of profound heartbreak. Even my own friends, the ones I play bridge with every Tuesday, don't know the full truth of it. They see the outcome, they see the changes in my life, but they don't know the why. They don't know about the cold plate of food that changed everything. My heart has been a locked diary, and I've been too afraid, ashamed perhaps, to open it. But the silence has become a heavier burden than the story itself. Until today, I finally feel I have the courage to speak my truth. Not for pity, but for the hope that my story might give another person the strength to reclaim their own dignity. Before I begin, my dears, would you do an old woman a kindness? Please, if you would, like this video and subscribe to our channel. It may seem like a small thing, a simple click of a button, but to me, it feels like you're holding my hand. Your support gives me the strength I need to finally unlock that diary and share this secret I have hidden for so long. It tells me that I am not alone in this world, and that someone out there is listening. Now, where to begin? It's not just about a restaurant, you see. It never is. These things are about respect, about love, about seeing a person, a mother, a grandmother, as a human being, not as a piece of old furniture you can tuck away in a corner. My late husband, Robert, God rest his soul, he always used to say, "Eleanor, our wealth isn't in the bank. It's in the character we build, in the family we raise." He was a good man, a hard-working man. He ran a small but successful hardware supply company. He wasn't a flashy man, but he was incredibly wise with his money. He invested, you see. Small amounts, here and there, over decades. He believed in planting acorns that would one day grow into mighty oaks. When he passed away 10 years ago, he left me not just with a broken heart, but with a portfolio of those little acorns, which, to my surprise, had grown into a small forest. I was never a frail flower, my dears. I was a teacher for 30 years. I managed the household, the budgets, the children's schedules, all while grading papers late into the night. After Robert was gone, I learned to manage that forest he left me. I sat with financial advisors, I read books, I learned the language of the market. Not because I wanted to be rich, but because I wanted to honor his legacy and ensure that our family, our son David, and his future family would always be secure. I was the quiet matriarch, the steady hand, a keeper of our family's security. I thought this was my role, my purpose. I thought it was appreciated. Oh, how foolish an old woman can be. I thought that by ensuring their comfort, I was ensuring my place in their hearts. I learned, in the cruelest way possible, that for some, a mother's worth is only measured by what she can provide, and once they feel they have it all, she becomes disposable. This story is about the moment I realized I was being disposed of, and the day I decided to prove that I was anything but disposable. My story, the part that truly explains the hurt, began in the year Robert passed. That was a time of great sorrow, a gray fog that settled over my life. But through that fog, my son David was my shining light. He and his new wife, Jessica, were my pillars. It all started so beautifully, you see. That's the most painful part of any betrayal. It doesn't begin with a slammed door. It begins with a warm smile. David, my David, was always a good boy. A sensitive soul. I remember when he was just 6 years old, he would pick dandelions from the yard, the ones most people call weeds, and bring them to me with the proudest look on his face, declaring they were the most beautiful flowers in the world for the most beautiful mommy. His heart was so pure. I would put them in a little glass on the kitchen windowsill, and they would stay there until they wilted, a testament to his sweet nature. I was so proud of the man he grew into, responsible, kind, with a good job in marketing. And then came Jessica. When David brought her home for the first time, my heart soared. She was everything I could have hoped for him. Bright, bubbly, with a laugh that could fill a room. She called me Mom from the very first day. "Oh, Mom," she'd say, linking her arm through mine. "David has told me so much about you. I feel like I know you already." She worked as an event planner, and she had this way of making everything feel special. She remembered my birthday, brought me flowers for no reason, and listened with wide, interested eyes as I told her stories about David's childhood. I thought, this is it. This is the daughter I never had. Our family is complete. Their wedding was one of the happiest days of my life. I remember standing there, watching them say their vows, and tears of pure joy streamed down my face. I saw a future filled with family dinners, holidays, and the sound of grandchildren's laughter filling my home. And for a few years, that is exactly what we had. Our Sundays were sacred. After Robert was gone, David and Jessica insisted I come over every single Sunday for dinner. My house, which had felt so empty and cavernous, would be a distant memory for that one afternoon. I would walk into their home, and the smell of roasting chicken or simmering beef stew would greet me like a warm hug. Jessica was a wonderful cook in those early days. She'd be there in the kitchen, an apron tied around her waist, and she'd shoo me away with a smile. "No, no, Mom," she'd say. "You put your feet up. You've cooked for us your whole life. It's our turn to take care of you." And oh, how I cherished those words. It's our turn to take care of you. It was music to my soul. I would sit in their comfortable living room, and soon enough, my grandson Leo was born. He became the sun in my sky. I would hold him for hours, his tiny body warm against my chest, and I'd look over at David and Jessica, and my heart would feel so full it might burst. The sound of their laughter, the sight of David playing with his son on the floor, the aroma of a family meal being prepared with love. This was my heaven on earth. This was the perfect picture of the family I had dedicated my life to building. I remember one Christmas Eve, just a few years ago. The tree was twinkling with lights, carols were playing softly on the radio, and the whole house smelled of pine needles and cinnamon. I had helped Jessica bake cookies all afternoon, our hands dusted with flour, laughing as Leo tried to sneak pinches of dough. David was assembling a new toy train set on the floor. At dinner, we raised our glasses, and David made a toast. "To Mom," he said, looking right at me, his eyes sincere and warm. "The heart of our family. We wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be us, without you. We love you." I can still feel the warmth of that moment. It was a perfect, crystalline memory. It was the memory of a family that was whole, loving, and kind. It was a memory of a time when I was seen, valued, and cherished. It was a time when my daughter-in-law looked at me with what I believed was genuine affection, and my son looked at me with what I knew was true love. It's important you know this, my dears. It's important you understand the beautiful before, so you can truly comprehend the shocking and painful after. Because that beautiful family, that warm kitchen, that feeling of being loved, little by little, it all began to fade, like a photograph left out in the sun, until the vibrant colors were gone, leaving only a pale, unrecognizable ghost of what used to be. And the first sign that something was terribly wrong, the first chill in the air, came from the one person I had welcomed into my heart as a daughter. The warmth I described, that perfect family picture, It didn't shatter all at once. Oh no, my dears, that would have been a mercy. Clean break hurts, but it heals. This was different. This was a slow poisoning, a creeping frost that numbed my heart long before it finally broke it. At first it was just small things, little whispers of change that you try to ignore. You tell yourself you're imagining it. My weekly phone calls to David, for instance. I've called him every Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. since he left for college. It was our little ritual. Suddenly, he stopped picking up. The phone would ring and ring, then go to his voicemail. A few hours later, a text would pop up. Sorry, Mom, swamped at work. Talk soon. At first, I believed it. He was a busy man with a demanding job, a wife, a child. Of course he was busy, but soon never came. Then, the call started being answered by Jessica. Her voice was always a little too bright, a little too saccharine. Oh, hi, Mom, she'd chirp. David's just in the middle of something right now. Can I take a message? It felt less like she was helping, and more like she was intercepting. Like she was a gatekeeper to my own son. I would leave a message, a simple just calling to say hello, dear. I love you, but the return call would rarely materialize. The silence on the other end of the line began to feel like a chasm opening between us, and I was on the wrong side. I'd tell myself, Eleanor, don't be a foolish old woman. You can't expect your son to drop everything for you. He has his own life now. And I would repeat that phrase to myself, his own life, and it felt like swallowing a little piece of glass each time. Because I never wanted to be his whole life. I just wanted to be a welcome part of it. Was that so much to ask? Little by little, the chills seeped into our Sunday dinners. The grand, loving meals Jessica used to prepare began to change. I remember one Sunday, she served a beautiful leg of lamb, glistening with herbs. She carved it at the table, placing generous slices on her plate, then on David's. When she came to my plate, she gave me the very end piece. It was dry, a little overcooked, and mostly bone. Here you go, Mom, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. David didn't seem to notice. Or if he did, he didn't say a word. I sat there, trying to saw through the tough little piece of meat, my heart feeling just as tough and dry. Maybe I was just being paranoid. It was just a piece of meat, after all. But the next week, it was the soupiest part of the casserole. The week after that, it was the smallest, slightly burnt piece of fish. It was never obvious. It was always deniable. If I had ever said anything, I would have sounded like a crazy, ungrateful old woman. What's wrong, Mom? I cooked you a meal. Isn't that enough? I could already hear her saying it in my head. So I said nothing. I just ate my lesser portion in silence, the food tasting like ashes in my mouth. The conversation at the table began to shrink as well. They would talk about things I had no part in, friends of theirs I'd never met, parties I wasn't invited to, plans for a future that didn't seem to include a space for me. I would try to join in, perhaps share a story about my week, and there would be a polite, brief pause before Jessica masterfully steered the conversation back to their world. I started to feel like a ghost at my own family's table, a silent observer to a life I was no longer truly living with them. A cold fear crawled up my spine every time I drove to their house. The place that was once my refuge was beginning to feel like a weekly ordeal, a test of my emotional endurance. The escalation became more pronounced around my birthday. My 71st, Daddy. For my 70th, the year before, they had thrown me a surprise party. The whole family was there. It was wonderful. But for my 71st, there was nothing. No party. Not even a special dinner. That Sunday, I walked in, my heart full of a quiet, hopeful anticipation. They would surely have a cake, at least. But there was no cake. There was no happy birthday. David gave me a quick hug and said, "Happy birthday, Mom," before turning his attention back to the football game on TV. Jessica handed me a small, gift-bagged box. Inside was a generic scented candle, the kind you buy at a supermarket when you've forgotten you need a gift. "Hope you like it," she said before turning to the kitchen. Later, As we were eating a very ordinary meal of spaghetti and jarred sauce, I tried to keep my voice light. You know, for my birthday, your father once tried to bake me an angel food cake from scratch. It was a disaster. It collapsed into a gooey mess, but we ate it with spoons, laughing the whole time. I was hoping to jog a memory, to spark some warmth. Jessica just shrugged. Oh, I was going to get you a cake, Mom. But the line at the bakery was just too long. You know how Sundays are. The line was too long. For my birthday, tears just wouldn't stop flowing later that night when I was home alone in my quiet house. I sat in Robert's favorite armchair and cried for the man who would have baked me a disastrous cake with love, and for the son who couldn't be bothered to stand in a line for his mother. I told myself to be strong, for the children's sake. But which children? My son was a stranger, and my grandson was a distant star. The thought was so painful, my heart felt like someone was squeezing it with their bare hands. Then came the money. It started with innocent-sounding questions from Jessica, usually when David was out of the room. That's such a big house for one person, Mom. The upkeep must be a fortune, she'd say, looking around my living room. Or, David was saying how complicated your husband's investments are. It must be a lot to keep track of. You should really let David help you simplify things, put it all in one, easy-to-manage place. A chill went through me. It wasn't the chill of sadness this time. It was the chill of alarm. Simplify? I knew what that meant. It meant putting it under their control. I had spent years learning to manage what Robert left me. I was proud of it. It was my connection to him, my duty, my independence. The idea that they saw it as a burden I should hand over to them. It felt predatory. They weren't just edging me out of their lives emotionally. They were probing the defenses around my financial security. Were they waiting for me to become frail, forgetful? At that moment, I felt like the sky was falling, but I was the only one who could see the cracks appearing. The cruelest blow, the one that cut deeper than any other, was Leo. My grandson. He was my joy, the pure, untainted part of my life. But my time with him was being curtailed, managed, and used as a weapon. Sorry, Mom, we can't do Sunday this week. Leo has a play date. We're taking Leo to a toddler gym class on Saturdays, so we won't be able to drop by. My weekly visits became bi-weekly, then monthly. When I did see him, Jessica was always there, hovering. If I tried to take him for a walk to the park, just the two of us, she would have an excuse. Oh, it's a bit too chilly for him today, Mom. Or he's about to have his nap. We can't mess up his schedule. I knew what was happening. I was being denied the one thing that gave me unconditional happiness. They were isolating me, and they were using my own grandson to do it. One afternoon I called, my voice shaking with the desperation I could no longer hide. Jessica, please. I haven't seen Leo in 3 weeks. Could I just come over for an hour? I'll bring a book to read to him. There was a pause on the line, and then her voice, as cold and sharp as ice. Mom, you have to understand, we are very busy. We have our own family, our own life to live. It's not all about you. It's not all about you. It's not all about you. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. I sank into a chair, the phone still pressed to my ear, unable to breathe. My entire life had been about them. Every decision, every sacrifice, every penny Robert and I saved was for David, for the family he would one day have. And now, I was being told that my desire to see my own grandson was selfish, that my love was an inconvenience. My heart was shattered. It wasn't just broken, it was ground into dust. That was when I started hearing about the gilded steer. It became a recurring theme in their conversations, a symbol of the life from which I was excluded. David got a promotion, so we went to the gilded steer to celebrate, Jessica would announce. We had the most incredible filet mignon at the gilded steer last night for our date night. They spoke of it with reverence. The dark wood, the leather booths, the perfectly cooked steaks. It was their special place. A place for an Iverian family. A place I was never, ever invited to. It was the temple of their new life, and I was not welcome inside. Which brings me to that final Sunday. The day the frost finally shattered my heart completely. I hadn't seen them in over a month. Jessica had called, her voice surprisingly cheerful. "Hi, Mom. Why don't you come over for dinner on Sunday? Around 6? Hope, that foolish, stubborn thing, flickered in my chest. Maybe she felt bad. Maybe they missed me. Maybe things were going to be okay. I spent the day getting ready, a nervous energy buzzing through me. I put on my nice blue dress, the one Robert always said brought out the color of my eyes. I even put on a little lipstick. I arrived at their door at 6 o'clock sharp, holding a pot of flowers for their porch. When I walked in, the aroma hit me immediately. It was rich, decadent, and utterly divine. It was the smell of butter and garlic and high-quality beef searing in a hot pan. It was the smell of the gilded steer. My heart leaped. They were making me this special meal. They were finally letting me into their world. I walked into the dining room, a smile on my face, ready to thank them. And then I stopped. The table was set, with their best china and the crystal glasses I had given them for their wedding. But it was set for only 2. David and Jessica were already seated, cutting into 2 thick, perfectly cooked ribeye steaks. A bottle of expensive red wine sat between them. They looked up when I entered, a brief flash of, was it guilt? In David's eyes before he looked down at his plate. "Oh, hi, Mom," Jessica said, her voice casual, as if this was completely normal. She took a sip of her wine. My own voice felt weak, thin. "Oh my, that smells wonderful, dears. What's the occasion?" Jessica waved her fork dismissively. "Oh, nothing special. David got his quarterly bonus, so we decided to treat ourselves. We love the gilded steers so much. We bought their at-home steak kit. It comes with everything." She sawed off another piece of her steak and ate it with relish. David remained silent, his eyes glued to his plate. He was cutting his steak into tiny, tiny pieces, his knuckles white. I stood there frozen, the pot of flowers feeling impossibly heavy in my hands. A steak kit for 2. They knew I was coming. They had invited me. "Don't worry, Mom," Jessica said, finally looking at me. But her eyes were void of any warmth. They were the eyes of a stranger. "I saved you dinner. It's in the microwave." The microwave. My feet felt like lead as I walked into the kitchen. The glorious smell of steak faded, replaced by the sterile hum of the appliance. I opened the small door. Inside sat a single, clear plastic container, beaded with condensation. I lifted it out. My hands were trembling. Inside, I could see it clearly. It was a thick, gray slice of leftover meatloaf from a dinner I knew they'd had earlier in the week. Next to it was a dollop of cold, lumpy mashed potatoes with a sad, congealed pool of brown gravy on top. I stood there in the fluorescent light of their kitchen, holding a cold plate of yesterday's unwanted food, while the sound of my son and his wife feasting on steak echoed from the other room. I looked at the pathetic meal in my hands. This is what they thought of me. This was my value. I was worth the leftovers. I was the scrap to be heated up after the feast was over. I didn't say a word. I didn't throw the container. I didn't scream. A strange and terrible calm washed over me. At that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It died. The loving, hopeful, forgiving part of my heart turned to ice. I looked through the doorway and saw my son, my David, the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. He was studiously avoiding my gaze, shoveling a piece of expensive steak into his mouth, chewing on his complicity. His silence was his answer. His silence was his betrayal. I placed the container of cold leftovers carefully on their counter. I turned, walked out of the kitchen, past their dining room table, and out their front door without a single word. I left the pot of flowers on their porch. Let them have something beautiful to look at while they ate their feast. I drove home, though I barely remember the journey. I sat in my own dark, silent kitchen for hours. The image of that container, the gray meatloaf, the face of my son, it all swirled in my mind. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. This was the family I had now. And in the profound silence of my home, surrounded by the memories of a better man and a better love, the tears finally came. But they were not the tears of a victim. They were hot, angry tears of grief for what I had lost. And as I cried, a new feeling began to crystallize from the pain. It was a cold, hard, and utterly clear resolution. They thought I was a frail old woman, to be placated with leftovers while they carved up the best parts of the life I had helped build for them. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. My husband taught me to plant acorns. He never said I couldn't use the oaks to build a battering ram. That night, children, after leaving that cold, miserable container on their pristine kitchen counter and driving home in a fog of disbelief and utter desolation, that was my final breaking point. It wasn't just the cold meatloaf, you see. It was the deliberate cruelty of it. The casual dismissal. The clear message. You are nothing. You are less than nothing. You are a discarded scrap. Wedding. And I walked into my quiet home, the silence no longer a comfort but a crushing weight. The flowers I'd brought, still sitting on their porch, mocked me. They were a gesture of love, met with an act of utter disdain. I didn't turn on a single light. I just sank onto the sofa, the one Robert and I picked out together, and stared into the dark. My tears had stopped. There were no more tears left to cry. My heart felt hollowed out, a dry, empty well. What did I do wrong? Was I too much? Not enough? Did I hover? Was I too generous? Did I love too fiercely? My mind spun with questions, 1,000 tiny knives twisting in the wound. I sat there for hours, the moon tracing its slow path across the sky outside my window. The initial pain, that sharp, searing agony, began to dull, replaced by something colder, harder. Something resolute. It was like watching a river of lava, boiling and destructive, slowly cool and solidify into unyielding rock. In that profound stillness, a voice, clear as a bell, spoke inside my head. It wasn't Robert's voice, though I often hear him in my quiet moments. It was I voice. Eleanor's voice. And it said, plain as day, no, not anymore. Something inside me broke, yes, but not in the way they intended. What broke was the last thread of my naive belief that love alone could mend deliberate unkindness. What shattered was the old Eleanor, the one who always put others first, who swallowed her pain for the sake of harmony, who believed in endlessly turning the other cheek. In that moment, something new, something fierce, awoke. I knew I couldn't go on like this anymore. I couldn't be their doormat, their forgotten elder, their convenient source of funds to be tapped when needed, but ignored when not. I had always been strong for my family, for my husband, for my son. Now, it was time to be strong for myself. And this wasn't about revenge, not truly. Oh, a part of me certainly wanted to see them face consequences for their heartlessness. Don't get me wrong. But deeper than that, it was about dignity. It was about reclaiming my worth, not just in their eyes, but in my own. It was about showing them, and showing myself, that an old woman, a grandmother, a mother, is not to be discarded. We are not weak because we love deeply. We are not foolish because we are trusting. We are not useless because our hair turns gray. We are the very foundation upon which families are built, and if that foundation is shaken, it will shake everything else. I got up from the sofa. My hands, which had been trembling for weeks every time I thought of them, were steady. My spine, which had felt bowed under the weight of their neglect, straightened. I walked into Robert's old study, a room I hadn't truly used since he passed, but which I kept just as he left it. His large oak desk, his worn leather chair. I sat down, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt his spirit, not as a source of grief, but as a source of strength. He was a shrewd businessman, my Robert, and he taught me a thing or two. I spent the rest of that night, and the days that followed, not crying, but planning, calculating. My mind, which they assumed was slowing with age, was sharper than it had ever been. I thought about the gilded steer, the place they revered, the symbol of their exclusion of me. It clicked into place. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a statement. And I was going to make my own. The first call I made the next morning was to Mr. Henderson, Robert's longtime financial advisor. He was a stern, quiet man, but utterly trustworthy. He knew the extent of Robert's investments, and mine. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice clear and firm, surprising even myself. "I need to discuss a significant change to my portfolio. I'm considering an acquisition, a rather large one." He was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Vance, are you quite well? This is rather out of character." "I am perfectly well, Mr. Henderson, and my character, like an old oak, has simply been weathering a storm. Now it's time to branch out." I could almost hear his surprised silence through the phone. "I want to explore the possibility of acquiring the Gilded Steer restaurant chain." There was a definite gasp on his end. "The Gilded Steer? Mrs. Vance, that's a very substantial enterprise. Are you certain?" "Quite certain, Mr. Henderson. And I need you to assemble a team. Discreetly. I want to understand every aspect of that business. Their financials, their operations, their ownership structure. I want to know if they're vulnerable, or if they'd be open to an offer. And if they aren't, I want to know how we can make them open to one." From that day forward, my life transformed. From swallowing anger, I moved to brave speaking out, not to them, but to the people who could help me execute my plan. I spent hours learning, researching. My kitchen table, which had seen so many family meals, was now covered in financial reports and business plans. I immersed myself in the world of high-end restaurants, supply chains, employee contracts. Who knew an old English teacher would find herself negotiating with corporate lawyers? It was exhilarating, a fire lit inside me that I hadn't felt in decades. My brain was buzzing, not with worry, but with strategy. I found out the Gilded Steer chain, while profitable, had some internal management issues and was privately owned by an aging founder who was considering retirement but hadn't found the right buyer. Perfect. My years of accumulated personal connections from Robert's business and my own community involvement, combined with Mr. Henderson's expertise, proved invaluable. I didn't just have money, I had a network. A network of people who respected Eleanor Vance, the woman who kept her word, who raised a good family, who endured with grace. They knew my integrity. When I said I was serious, they believed me. The negotiations were lengthy, complex, and sometimes frustrating. But I held firm. I was polite, but utterly unyielding. My years of managing a household budget, raising a stubborn son, and teaching teenagers the nuances of Shakespeare had given me an iron will. I thought about the cold meatloaf every time I felt tired or doubted myself. It was my fuel. It reminded me what I was fighting for, not just a business but my self-respect. The most critical part of my plan, beyond acquiring the chain, involved David, my son. This wasn't about financially ruining him, no. That wouldn't teach him anything. It was about humbling him, about forcing him to see the world from a different perspective, the perspective of those he had so carelessly dismissed. I leveraged my deep knowledge of our internal family situations. I knew David's pride, his easy comfort. I knew that he relied heavily on his well-paying marketing job, the one that allowed him to dine on expensive steak while his mother ate leftovers. I learned, through discreet inquiries, that David's company was facing some internal restructuring. Layoffs were coming, and his department was vulnerable. I didn't cause it, my dears, but I certainly didn't stop it. When the news finally broke that David had been let go from his high-flying marketing job, a job he had constantly used to excuse his unavailability and neglect of me, I knew my moment had arrived. Jessica, of course, panicked. They had grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle, a certain level of comfort. And without David's income, it would all come crashing down. That's when my carefully constructed wise counterattack came into play. I called David, something I hadn't initiated in months. My voice was calm, almost detached. "David, I heard about your job. I'm very sorry, dear. Times are tough." He sounded dejected, defeated. Yeah, Mom died. It's a mess. I don't know what we're going to do. She's not handling it well. Well, I said, a small knowing smile playing on my lips that he couldn't see, as it happens. I've recently become involved in a new venture. A business opportunity. And we're looking for good, reliable people. He perked up, a spark of his old self returning. Really, Mom? What kind of venture? Do you think there's anything? Senior management? I have a lot of experience in marketing strategy. Oh, it's a restaurant chain, dear, I said, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. A very well-known one, in fact. The Gilded Steer. There was silence on his end. A long, stunned silence. Then, a hesitant, almost hopeful question. Mom, are you serious? You bought the Gilded Steer? Yes, David, I confirmed. All of it. The entire chain. It's a substantial undertaking, but a sound investment, I believe. I let that sink in. His mother, the woman they fed leftovers, now owned the temple of their exclusivity. The irony, children, was as sweet as the finest dessert. Well, that's incredible, Mom. His tone was a mix of awe and, I detected, a flicker of renewed self-interest. So, about those positions, I could really bring a lot to the table. Strategic planning, customer acquisition. I'm sure you could, dear, I said, cutting him off gently but firmly. But we're starting fresh, you see, with a focus on foundational principles. And right now we have an urgent need in our main city location, a position that requires dedication, humility, and a strong work ethic. It's an entry-level position, but it's a job, David. A way to get back on your feet. He paused, clearly considering. His pride was battling his desperation. What kind of position, Mom? We need a new dishwasher, David, I said, my voice unwavering. The pay is modest, but it's consistent, and it comes with staff meals. I let the last part hang there, a subtle, sharp jab. Staff meals. Not steak. Not cold leftovers. Just honest, simple staff meals. His gasp was audible. A dishwasher? Mom, I'm a senior marketing executive. I have a degree. And now, my dear, you have a chance to learn the true value of hard work from the ground up, I replied, my tone soft, but completely unyielding. It's a physically demanding job, but it builds character. And it's a job, a paycheck. Take it or leave it, David. The offer won't last forever. I gave him 24 hours to think about it. 24 hours for him to swallow his pride, to see how truly desperate his situation was. 24 hours for him to realize that the mother he had taken for granted was now the only one offering him a lifeline, albeit one he would have to pull himself up with. The next day my phone rang. It was David. His voice was subdued, weary. Mom, he said, I'll take it. The dishwasher job. Thank you. From passive endurance, I had moved to active attack, but it was an attack of wisdom, not aggression. It wasn't about destroying him, but about reshaping him. It was about showing him that life, like a good meal, requires effort, appreciation, and respect for every single ingredient, every single person who contributes to it, no matter how small their role may seem. The transformation in my hands, from trembling with despair to resting with firm determination, mirrored the awakening of my inner strength. My heart, once shattered, was now beating with a powerful, purposeful rhythm. The matriarch was back, and she was making sure everyone knew it. And so, my dears, the wheels I had set in motion began to turn. The resolution wasn't a sudden, dramatic explosion. It was a slow, quiet unfolding, like a flower opening in the morning sun after a long, dark night. David started his job at the Gilded Steer 2 weeks later. I went to the restaurant that first evening, not to gloat, but to observe. I sat in a quiet booth in the corner, where I could see the swinging doors to the kitchen. A couple of times I saw him. His face was flushed from the heat and steam. His movements were clumsy at first, but determined. There was no arrogance left in his posture. There was only the weary stoop of a man doing hard, honest work for the first time in his life. He was learning, in the most visceral way possible, what it meant to be at the bottom, to be invisible, to do the work that makes the feast possible, even if you never get to taste it. And Jessica? Oh, Jessica. She had to face a new reality. The shopping sprees, the lavish date nights, the sense of effortless superiority, all of it vanished overnight. They had to downsize their beautiful home. They sold their expensive car. Jessica had to get a second job, working evenings in retail, to help make ends meet. She found out very quickly that life is not so glamorous when you're the one folding sweaters for rude customers instead of being the customer yourself. Her cruelty had been born of comfort and privilege. Now, with both of those things gone, a stark reality set in. I didn't cut them off completely. I made sure Leo always had what he needed: new shoes, school supplies, a little savings account for his future. This was never about punishing my grandson. But for David and Jessica, the support came with a condition: humility. They were learning, slowly and painfully, that respect is not a birthright. It's earned. About 6 months after he started, I was at the restaurant for a meeting with my management team. As I was leaving through the back service entrance, I saw David. He was on his break, sitting on an overturned milk crate in the alley, eating a simple sandwich. He looked up and saw me. For a moment, we just looked at each other. The anger was gone from his eyes. The resentment was gone. What I saw instead was a profound, weary sadness, and a flicker of understanding. He stood up, wiping his hands on his apron. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet. I get it now." "Get what, David?" I asked, softly. "Everything," he said, gesturing back toward the noisy kitchen. "The work, the feeling of being unseen. The way people look right through you. How much it means when someone just says a simple thank you." He looked down at his red, chapped hands. "I am so sorry, Mom. For the leftovers, for everything, for not seeing you." Tears welled up in my eyes then, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of release. He was finally seeing me. Not as a bank, not as an obligation, but as his mother. That was the moment the resolution truly settled in my heart. He worked that job for a full year. By the end, he was the hardest worker on the kitchen staff, promoted to head of dishwashing and inventory. He had earned the respect of his coworkers, not because he was the owner's son, but because he worked. Only then did I offer him a new position, an entry-level one, in the corporate office, helping to manage supply chains. He had to earn his way up again, and this time, he was doing it with humility and a deep understanding of what it takes to run a business from the ground up. The lesson I learned, my dear ones, is that sometimes love has to be tough. True love isn't about enabling bad behavior. It's not about endlessly forgiving without change. True love is about holding people accountable, about setting boundaries to protect your own heart and dignity. I learned that my worth isn't determined by how others treat me. It's determined by how I choose to value myself. I had to stop waiting for them to give me a seat at their table, and instead, build a table of my own. And so, to all of you out there, I want to speak directly to your hearts. If you're also going through something similar, if you feel unseen, unappreciated, or disrespected by the very people you have given your life to, please listen to Grandma. Children, remember Grandma's words. Your kindness is not a weakness. Your love is not a fault. But you must never, ever allow someone to mistake your loving heart for a welcome mat. People, at this age I finally understand that you teach people how to treat you. If you accept leftovers, they will continue to serve them. I hope you won't be like the old grandma, who waited until her heart was shattered to finally stand up. If Grandma had known these truths earlier, perhaps years of quiet heartache could have been avoided. You deserve the finest steak, my dears, not just the scraps. You deserve a seat of honor at the feast of life. This story, as you can see, has a complicated ending. It's not a fairy tale. David and I are rebuilding our relationship, slowly, brick by brick. It's built on a new foundation of mutual respect now, not just familial obligation. Jessica is quieter, more thoughtful. I see them on Sundays again. And now, when we sit down for a meal, everyone gets the same portion, served with gratitude. Sharing this with you all has lifted a great weight from my shoulders. Thank you for listening, for giving me this space to finally speak my truth. If my story has touched you, or if you have a story of your own that you feel needs to be heard, I hope you'll feel safe to share it. Please, my sweethearts, if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to turn on that little notification bell so we can share more stories together. And please, share your own thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Reading them reminds me that we are all connected in this great, complicated, and beautiful journey of life. Grandma will always love you all. Remember that no matter what happens in your life, you must love yourself first and foremost. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and kindness, most especially you. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Love you all. This is Grandma Eleanor, and I'll see you in the next story.